You are the royal doctor in Madrid's Grand Palace. The year is 1834. The king is dead. But your job is not over. You've been called to the private chambers of the late King Ferdinand VII for something so strange, so unnatural, that for a moment you wonder if you're dreaming. Queen Maria Cristina stands before you. Her eyes are red with tears. Her voice shakes. She gives you a request so chilling it makes your blood run cold. Slowly, you walk toward the bed where the king's body rests. Even in death, Ferdinand seems to glare at you like he still holds power over everyone in the room. But it's not his cold face that draws your eyes. It's what's under the silk sheets. The one thing that defined his life as much as his cruelty, his paranoia, and his betrayals. The thing that historians whispered about in secret for generations, yet never dared write in any royal document. You lift the sheet, and there it is. Ferdinand's grotesque, strange, and oversized manhood. The same thing that brought him both deep shame and twisted pride. You begin the process of preservation, but your mind is somewhere else, remembering the quiet rumors you've heard in the palace halls, the specially made pillows, the screams of royal wives, the strange medical tools, the desperate, painful attempts to produce a child, all because of one cruel joke from nature. You realize you're not just preserving a body, you're preserving a symbol of a broken reign, a symbol of a king whose physical deformity reflected the twisted, destructive rule he forced upon Spain. To understand the dark legacy of Ferdinand VII, we must go back to the beginning, back to the day he was born already cursed, not by magic, not by God, but by the bloodline that made him king. For centuries, the royal families of Europe, especially the Spanish Habsburgs and Bourbons, had married their own relatives, cousins to cousins, uncles to nieces. Over and over again, it was done to protect royal power, but it came at a terrible cost. Generation after generation, the blood became weaker, minds became unstable, bodies became deformed, and finally, Ferdinand was born on October 14, 1784, at El Escorial Palace. Ferdinand entered the world. His parents, King Charles IV and Queen Maria Louisa, were themselves first cousins. From the moment Ferdinand opened his eyes, fate had already decided he would suffer for the choices of his ancestors. As he grew up, people noticed something was very wrong. His body developed normally at first, but then his private part began to change, not just in size, but in shape. By the time he was a teenager, doctors in the palace were already whispering about it. They didn't know how to explain it. Some said it looked like it belonged to a different species. Records hidden in old Vatican archives describe it in cold medical terms, but the horror is clear. One doctor wrote, "His Royal Highness has a member of such unnatural size and strange shape that normal relations may be impossible." Another wrote, more bluntly, "It is thin like a wax stick at the base, thick as a man's fist at the end, and long enough to use as a cane." In an era when the ideal male body followed the clean, balanced forms of ancient Greek statues, refined, elegant Ferdinand's condition marked him as something freakish, something monstrous. It became the shame of his life, and the obsession of everyone around him. But Ferdinand's misery didn't stop there. His family life was no better. His father, Charles IV, was weak. He cared more about hunting than ruling. His mother, Maria Louisa, was known for her strong desires and her open love affair with Manuel de Godoy, who was more powerful than the king himself. Young Ferdinand watched all of this. He saw betrayal every day. He saw power being taken from his father and given to another man. He learned that trust was dangerous, that power was everything, and deep inside him the pain grew. Whispers about his strange body spread through the palace. Servants giggled behind closed doors. Noblemen made quiet jokes. Foreign diplomats wrote secret letters to their governments, calling him the Spanish embarrassment. Even as a boy, Ferdinand knew people were laughing at him. He started to see mockery everywhere, in his teachers' voices, in the fake smiles of visiting princesses, even in the respectful bows of his subjects. His paranoia was real. They were laughing, but not always for the reason he thought. As he entered adolescence, the change in him was clear. His tutors saw it first. He became secretive, cold, cruel. He began punishing anyone who even looked at him the wrong way. One day, a young palace page accidentally walked in on Ferdinand while he was changing clothes. The boy saw the thing the prince most wanted to hide. Ferdinand didn't just dismiss him. He had the boy whipped and exiled his entire family from Madrid. His message was clear. No one could see his shame and live without punishment. When it came time for Ferdinand to marry, the problem couldn't be hidden anymore. Royal doctors wrote private reports describing the king's anatomy. One doctor wrote, "The base is no wider than a thumb, yet the end is of a size that defies nature. The length, almost 10 inches, unaroused, and when aroused, far more." But the shape was even worse than the size. It curved, it twisted, it had strange tissue growths, soft lumps of flesh with no purpose. No normal relationship would be possible, so secret plans were made. Royal craftsmen were ordered to make special tools, cushions, oils, supports, things to help the prince perform without injuring himself for his future wife. These items were called marital aids, though they were more like medical equipment than anything romantic. But even with these tools, the king's deformity haunted his mind. He became obsessed with potions and pills that promised to fix him. Doctors from across Europe were brought in. All promised miracles. All failed. He drank mixtures of ground rhino horn, powdered pearls, exotic herbs. Some potions were supposed to shrink his member. Others were meant to help him father children. None worked, but Ferdinand believed them. And so, the scams continued. In 1802, Ferdinand married his first cousin, Princess Maria Antonia of Naples and Sicily. Both were still teenagers. She arrived in Madrid full of hope. She had heard that some people called Ferdinand the desired one. She imagined a noble, romantic prince. The wedding was grand. The streets were filled with music. The people cheered. The young couple looked like a perfect royal pair. Maria Antonia was smart, kind, and truly excited for her new life. Ferdinand, in public, acted charming and gentle. But every wedding ends, and the wedding night begins. That's when the nightmare started. One of Ferdinand's servants approached Maria Antonia's maids. He told them to prepare the bedroom in a special way. Strange cushions were brought in, bottles of oil, medical-looking tools. The maids were confused, but they were told this was just royal custom. Maria Antonia didn't know what was coming. Her education had been religious and strict. She had no real knowledge of what happened between husband and wife. No one had prepared her for this. When Ferdinand walked into the bedroom and undressed, the young princess screamed. One of her ladies wrote years later, "Her Majesty cried out like she had seen the devil. She shouted, 'Monster, monster,' and backed into a wall, shaking." She had never imagined anything like it. The size, the shape, the twisting, the strange growths. It looked less like a man's body and more like something from a nightmare. What followed wasn't a wedding night, it was a medical procedure. Ferdinand's doctors had to enter the room. They explained what needed to happen. The cushions were arranged, oils applied, and the process began, cold, clinical, and terrifying. Maria Antonia was given laudanum, a strong drug, to calm her. Even with it, the experience left her broken. Ferdinand, already filled with shame, now felt rage at his wife's reaction. He believed she was the problem, that her horror was preventing them from conceiving a child. Maria Antonia, on the other hand, became deeply traumatized. She began taking more and more laudanum, not just for pain but to escape reality. Their nights together became a grim routine. Ferdinand would summon doctors to prepare the bedroom. Maria Antonia would be drugged. The act would happen like surgery. Then they would retreat to different sides of the palace. As the months passed and no child came, Ferdinand's obsession grew. He blamed Maria Antonia. He said her fear and disgust were blocking conception. He began forcing new, strange methods. He ordered leather and silk restraints, made by the same men who crafted his royal saddles. These were used to keep his wife in place, to stop her from pulling away. He turned to astrology, timed their encounters with the stars and moon. He invited mystics into the palace, men claiming to control the heavens. He bought more potions, more charms. He became desperate, and the palace grew darker. One day, a strange man came to the palace, a traveling mystic who claimed to hold ancient secrets from the East. He told King Ferdinand that his unusual body was not a curse, but a gift. The mystic called it the dragon's rod, a sign of divine power. He said that if the king followed certain sacred rituals, he could unlock its true purpose, fertility. Ferdinand believed him. For 3 full months, he and Queen Maria Antonia followed these bizarre ceremonies. They burned incense. They repeated strange chants. They tried unfamiliar positions based on ancient Chinese writings. Then, something remarkable happened. Maria Antonia became pregnant, not once, but twice. The entire court rejoiced. The king stood taller. His confidence returned. Spain held its breath, waiting for the birth of an heir. But both pregnancies ended in disaster. The first miscarriage came in 1804, in the 4th month. The court doctors blamed it on Maria Antonia's delicate nature. But the truth, which they dared not speak, was much darker. The violence and trauma of her sexual experiences with Ferdinand had made it impossible for her body to carry a child. The second miscarriage, in 1805, was even worse. This time, she carried the baby almost to full term. But during a brutal and bloody labor, she lost the child and nearly died herself. Maria Antonia never truly recovered. Her addiction to laudanum grew worse. She began to drift through the palace like a ghost, silent, pale, and lost. And Ferdinand? His reaction revealed the full cruelty of his soul. Instead of comforting his wife, he blamed her. He claimed she was doing it on purpose, taking secret potions to stop pregnancy, moving the wrong way to cause miscarriages, or even being a secret liberal who didn't want to give Spain a proper Catholic heir. These ideas spread through the palace. Servants whispered. Rumors flew. Maria Antonia began to believe them herself. She thought she was cursed, that she had sinned in some unknown way. She spent her final months in constant prayer, begging God for forgiveness for crimes she hadn't committed. In May 1807, at just 21 years old, Maria Antonia died. The official cause was listed as fever and complications from a weak constitution, but that was a lie. She died from despair. Her mind and body were broken by years of trauma, addiction, and emotional abuse. Even in death, she found no peace. Within days, rumors began to swirl. Some said Ferdinand had poisoned her, tired of her failures and ready to try again with another wife. The palace apothecary, the man who had managed Maria Antonia's medicine, was found dead. Shortly after her passing, a note was found in his room, but the king's guards seized it immediately. No one ever saw it again. Some believed the note contained confessions about poison. Others thought it revealed the truth about Ferdinand's condition and the unbearable pressure placed on the Queen. Publicly, Ferdinand mourned. He wore black. He cried at her funeral. But behind closed doors, he seemed relieved. He quickly began looking for a new wife, this time focusing only on women who had already proven they could have children. Meanwhile, his doctors were racing to find new ways to fix the king's condition. They tried new potions, new equipment, even considered surgery. They created more advanced marital aids, hoping to make things less painful for his next bride. But they were only treating the symptoms. The real problem was much deeper. Ferdinand was changing. His trauma and shame had turned into something darker, something more dangerous. He could no longer connect with people. He didn't see others as human. His first wife had been a tool, one that failed. Now she was gone. His people were tools. His guards, his servants, even his advisors' tools to serve him. And if any tool failed, it was to be broken. His behavior toward the palace staff grew worse. Orders became more cruel, more random. A servant who caught a glimpse of the king while he bathed was not just fired, he vanished. Guards who didn't keep absolute silence about the royal chambers were sent to dangerous war zones on the frontiers. He became obsessed with the idea that everyone was mocking him behind his back, and many were. People were still whispering about his deformity, but Ferdinand's response became violent. He made secret lists of people he suspected of laughing at him. He planned ways to ruin them. By 1807, he had become the center of a secret conspiracy. Powerful nobles and army officers had had enough of King Charles IV and his unpopular advisor, Manuel de Gordo. They saw Ferdinand as their way to remove the old regime. They called themselves the Fernandinos. They spread stories about how Ferdinand was brave, wise, and patriotic. They called him El Decido, the desired one. But behind the scenes, even they knew something was wrong. They had seen his paranoia, his strange behavior, his cruelty, but they thought they could control him. They were wrong. In October 1807, Ferdinand's plan to overthrow his own father was discovered. It became known as the El Escorial conspiracy. When caught, Ferdinand showed his true colors. He betrayed everyone. He confessed to everything, named every co-conspirator, begged his parents for mercy. His allies were imprisoned, exiled, or executed. Ferdinand walked free. He had proven that he would use anyone, then destroy them when it suited him. And still, his body continued to betray him. Doctors noted that his deformity was getting worse. It was growing, changing shape, new lumps, new curves. Some modern experts believe he suffered from a rare hormonal condition called megalophallus, causing abnormal growth throughout his life. Whatever the cause, one thing was clear: he would need even more advanced equipment and more submissive wives if he ever wanted a child. So the palace focused on finding women who could be controlled. Women who could be broken, if needed. The royal workshop deep beneath the palace became a strange place. Half medical lab, half torture chamber. There, the king's craftsmen created bizarre tools. Adjustable pillows, restraints, metal instruments, all designed to make sex with the king survivable. The craftsmen were sworn to secrecy. Some were paid well, others disappeared. When Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, Ferdinand was forced to abdicate. He became a prisoner, and his greatest fear came true. The French knew everything. Their spies had collected detailed files on the Spanish royal family, including the king's most private shame. Ferdinand spent 6 years as a prisoner in the Château de Valençay in France. There, French doctors examined him without the respect his Spanish ones had been forced to show. They were thorough, almost cruel. But the reports they left behind are the most detailed descriptions of Ferdinand's condition ever found. They describe an organ so large and unnatural it seemed mythological. They believed it was the result of multiple genetic disorders colliding in one unlucky man, while the people of Spain bled and died fighting to restore him. Ferdinand spent his time writing letters to find a new wife. He reached out to royal families across Europe, begging for a bride who would accept his special needs. He didn't write about Spain's suffering. He didn't ask how to help the poor or rebuild the nation. All he cared about was his body and the heir he still hoped to produce. In 1814, Ferdinand returned to Spain. The people went wild. They cried in the streets, threw flowers, called him their savior. Children who had never seen a king before shouted with joy. The capital lit up with celebration. Ferdinand smiled, waved, but his mind wasn't on the people or the country. It was already planning his next wedding night. He immediately ordered new marital devices, this time from across Europe, Germany, Italy, even the Ottoman Empire. Artisans were brought in, sworn to secrecy. They created a new set of tools, hidden in locked chests, waiting for the king's next wife. That wife was Maria Isabel of Portugal. Another cousin, just 19 years old. She arrived in 1816, full of hope and excitement. Her ladies-in-waiting had been warned. They were told about the special preparations needed, but nothing could prepare her for the truth. The wedding was a grand show of gold and music. Ferdinand stood tall in royal robes, but his face was pale. He had spent the last week in secret meetings with doctors, alchemists and one mysterious man said to be from the East, an expert in royal difficulties. The wedding night was a disaster. The screams that echoed through the palace halls were not of passion. They were of fear, of pain. Servants found blood on the sheets, broken furniture. The next morning, Maria Isabel had a stutter. She flinched. When her husband entered the room, she had been traumatized. Her doctors said she suffered from hysteria. Today, we would call it PTSD. Her maids said she had nightmares, crying out about the monster that haunted her sleep. Ferdinand saw her fear not as a tragedy, but as an insult. His paranoia exploded. He believed his wife was mocking him, working with foreign enemies, laughing behind his back. He had her letters read, her food tested for poison, her rooms searched. The king's private curse had now become Spain's national nightmare. His sexual dysfunction was now a political sickness eating away at everything and everyone around him. The pressure on King Ferdinand to have a child wasn't just a duty, turned into a dangerous obsession. It controlled not only his life and Queen Isabel's, but also the entire Spanish royal court. He began seeking help from every possible source, even those with no medical credibility. Doctors, anatomists, and even circus performers claiming to be experts in human anatomy were called into the palace. The king's bedroom became a strange experiment site, where all sorts of sexual trials took place, pushing far beyond anything that could be considered normal or humane. One disturbing story comes from the private diary of a court physician. It tells how Ferdinand allowed foreign medical experts, Germans, French, and others to watch him in his most private moments, hoping they could fix his problems. His marriage bed became more like a bizarre medical theater. These outsiders took notes and drew diagrams of the king's failures. Some of these documents later circulated across European universities, making Ferdinand's most personal weakness a subject of public study. Isabel, caught in the middle of this humiliating nightmare, began to break down completely. She stopped eating, lost a dangerous amount of weight, and developed a distant, vacant stare that unsettled everyone around her. What had once been bursts of emotion became a kind of emptiness. She moved through the palace like a ghost, barely alive, haunted and trapped. Ferdinand's inability to produce an heir soon had political consequences too. Spain's colonies in the Americas, already in rebellion, used his failure as proof that the Bourbon dynasty had lost God's favor. Revolutionaries portrayed Ferdinand as a broken, weak man, not just politically but sexually. To them, his dysfunction was symbolic of a decaying empire. The king reacted, as he always did, with fear and force. He began arresting anyone suspected of spreading rumors about his private life. The Inquisition, which Ferdinand had brought back when he took power, was now used to investigate even whispers against the crown. People could be punished simply for making jokes or comments about the king's condition. Even private talks between married couples could lead to prison or worse. His paranoia knew no bounds. He ordered the creation of secret passages throughout the palace so he could move unseen. He had mirrors placed in clever ways to spy on servants and listen for gossip. A whole team of spies was paid just to report on what people were saying about his marriage. Meanwhile, Isabel's mental and physical health crumbled. She started showing signs of what doctors then called phantom pregnancies, where a woman experiences the symptoms of pregnancy, even though there's no baby. Each time, Ferdinand got his hopes up, only to fall into despair when he learned it wasn't real. These false alarms became a dark joke among the palace staff. They would watch as Ferdinand wandered outside her room, praying and swearing, begging for a miracle. When the truth was revealed each time, he sank into weeks-long depressions. Government meetings were cancelled. Spain, already on the edge, was left leaderless again and again. In 1818, after years of emotional and physical suffering, Queen Isabel finally escaped through death. Officially, the doctors called it nervous exhaustion, but some in the palace believed she had ended her life through subtle acts of self-harm. Her confessor said her final words were a quiet prayer, thankful that she would soon be free. Ferdinand's response showed just how far gone he was. Instead of mourning, he became obsessed with the idea that Isabel had been murdered to stop him from having children. He demanded autopsies, arrested her servants, and accused her closest ladies in waiting of conspiracy. He couldn't accept that she had simply died of despair. The funeral was a horror show. Ferdinand kept returning to her body during preparations, touching her cold face and muttering about her wasted womb. He had a death mask made and displayed it in his room. Visitors later said they saw him talking to it as though she were still alive. But his search for an heir didn't end. He couldn't afford to stop. Not long after Isabel's funeral, the hunt for another bride began. The problem was finding someone willing to marry him. Word of his sexual failures had spread. All over Europe, royal families pulled their daughters out of talks. Some asked for extreme conditions, like separate bedrooms and personal guardsby, for even considering marriage. Eventually, they found Maria Josepha Amalia of Saxony. Her family needed money, and that made them willing to accept the risk. She was older than Isabel had been, more mature and prepared. She even brought her own physician and medical supplies, knowing what she was walking into. For her, marriage to Ferdinand was not about love, was a clinical challenge. Their wedding was quiet, much smaller than the past ceremonies. The royal court had grown tired of failed marriages. There were fewer guests, fewer celebrations, and very little excitement. But Maria Josepha came with a plan. Her time with Ferdinand was organized like a medical experiment. Scheduled attempts at intimacy, monitored closely, with every result carefully recorded. She wrote everything down: methods, times, results, like a scientist. This made Ferdinand feel more like a lab subject than a husband. He started to believe she didn't love him, but was spying on him. He became paranoid, thinking she was sending secrets about his body to foreign powers. His spies confirmed that she wrote to her old doctors in Saxony, and this only made things worse. Meanwhile, the country was falling apart. Spain's colonies had broken away. Mexico, Argentina, and others were now independent. With them went the wealth that had powered Spain for centuries. But the king was too focused on his private problems to deal with the national crisis. Government work was delayed whenever he had a setback in the bedroom. Meetings were cancelled, while he tried out new cures for infertility. By this point, even the people had started to see the truth. They had once celebrated his return, but now many wished he had never come back. In the cities, rebellion stirred again. In the countryside, lawlessness spread. People were starving while Ferdinand spent fortunes on doctors, foreign advisors, and strange medical devices. Then, something unbelievable happened. In 1829, Maria Josepha became pregnant. The news shocked everyone. How had it happened? Had a miracle occurred? Some said it was divine intervention. Others suspected a secret affair. Ferdinand didn't care. He was overjoyed and terrified. He tightened security, hired Europe's top doctors, and had her rooms blessed by every priest in the city. But the happiness didn't last. Around the 7th month, Maria Josepha began to experience serious complications. Today, doctors believe she had a condition called placental abruption, but back then, treatments were chaotic. Ferdinand added to the confusion by bringing in mystics and alchemists, mixing superstition with real medicine. On May 18, 1829, she went into early labor. It was a nightmare. Ferdinand insisted on being in the room, even though he had no idea what he was doing. The baby, a girl, died just hours after birth. Maria Josepha survived the delivery but became very ill. She died 3 weeks later, most likely from infection and grief. The king lost his mind. He refused to let the bodies be buried. He ordered his doctors to try and bring them back to life. For days, the palace was filled with the stench of death. The staff begged him to let go, but he kept demanding impossible miracles. When he finally accepted reality, he fell into the darkest depression of his life. He stopped eating, stopped meeting with ministers, and spent his days staring at the death masks of all three of his wives. Spain was collapsing, and its king had become a ghost. But fate had one more twist. That same year, 1829, Ferdinand, now 45 years old, was arranged to marry again. His advisors were desperate to save the dynasty. They chose Maria Cristina of Naples. What they didn't tell him was that she was already pregnant with another man's child. The wedding was absurd. Everyone could see the bride was expecting. But Ferdinand, desperate for a child, pretended not to notice. He told himself it was a miracle when the baby, Isabella II, was born in 1830. He treated it as the answer to all his prayers, even though he knew deep down it wasn't his. He and Maria Cristina lived in a lie. She acted like she respected him. He acted like he believed her. Still, he continued trying to have a child with her, this time for real. The same cycle repeated. Medical visits, doctors, failed attempts, and growing madness. Ferdinand became more paranoid than ever. He started bursting into his wife's rooms at night with armed guards, convinced she was plotting against him. He had holes drilled into the walls so he could spy on her, watching her every move like a prisoner guard. She knew it too. She moved carefully, said little, and trusted no one. Meals turned into trials. Every dish had to be tasted and then waited on for 30 minutes before it reached the king to check for poison. Servants fainted from stress, and Ferdinand saw this as proof of assassination attempts. Maria Cristina slowly fell into the same madness that had taken Isabel and Maria Josepha. Her letters to family in Naples revealed a woman falling apart. She wrote of shadows, fear, and never feeling alone, not even for a moment. The Queen once said her life felt like she was living inside a glass cage where even her breathing was watched closely for any hint of rebellion. King Ferdinand's paranoia didn't stop with his wife or family. It had spread like a disease across the entire royal court. He became so suspicious that he started rotating his personal guards every day, thinking that if someone stayed too long, they might be turned by his enemies. Ministers in his cabinet were put through strange loyalty tests. He would make conflicting statements in private meetings just to see who would dare to correct him. Anyone who did was seen as a traitor. What was once one of Europe's most refined courts turned into a disturbing theater of distrust and fear. People spoke in whispers, avoided eye contact with the king, and learned to move like diplomats trapped in enemy territory. Conversations were filled with codes. Friendships ended, and alliances formed, all depending on who seemed loyal to which side. Everyone knew one wrong word could send you into exile or a prison cell. Even his baby daughter, Isabella, didn't escape his paranoia. Though he knew she wasn't his biological child, Ferdinand felt a strange mix of affection and resentment toward her. She was going to inherit his throne, and that reality constantly reminded him of his greatest failure. He hadn't been able to produce a legitimate heir. He would sit for hours just staring at her, searching for features that might prove she was his. He even ordered artists to paint detailed portraits of Isabella as she grew, comparing them to images of himself and men his wife had known before. This obsession became his torment. The child who would carry on his dynasty was also living proof of his failure as a man. It was a painful irony. His biggest political win, securing the line of succession, was also his deepest personal shame. It ate away at him, turning every smile toward his daughter into a wound. Desperate for answers, Ferdinand began consulting doctors and genealogists, trying to find scientific proof that Isabella was his. These experts, afraid of telling him the truth, gave carefully vague reports. Their words were crafted to be interpreted however the king wanted, just enough to keep themselves safe. Today, those reports sit hidden in palace archives, a quiet record of men trying to survive an impossible task. Ferdinand's control over his wife became more invasive. He appointed specific servants to spy on her letters, not just reading them, but reporting how her face looked while she wrote them. Every part of her daily life was tracked. How long she prayed, what books she read, who she spoke to in public. Under this pressure, Queen Maria Cristina had to become a master of pretending. In public, she appeared calm and graceful. In private, she was barely holding herself together. Centuries later, her private diary was found hidden behind a fake wall. In it, she wrote of feeling like an actress who could never break character, not even in her dreams. Ferdinand's mental state wasn't just a personal crisis anymore, it was turning into an international issue. Foreign ambassadors began reporting his strange behavior to their own governments. Talks of royal marriages and European alliances stalled. No one wanted to make deals with a kingdom ruled by a man so unstable. The king saw murder plots in everything. When his wife asked to redecorate her rooms, he thought she was creating hiding spots for poison. When someone complimented the queen's looks, he wondered if they were sending secret messages. Even her prayers came under suspicion. Was she truly religious, or was she trying to communicate with foreign powers? The paranoia wasn't just emotional, it was expensive. Ferdinand poured massive amounts of money into hiring spies, building alarm systems, constructing hidden passageways, and employing multiple sets of guards, tasters, and servants so no single group could ever conspire against him. All this spending worsened Spain's already deep financial crisis. While the people starved, the king built himself a palace of fear. The constant stress took a toll on his health. He couldn't sleep, his stomach was in knots, and he developed tremors. His paranoia created a self-feeding loop. The more afraid he became, the more he acted out, which then made his fears even worse. He was trapped in a spiral of his own making. Even those closest to him weren't safe. His own family became suspects. Regular family events like birthdays became tense, suspicious affairs. Ferdinand would stare at flower arrangements or the choice of cake, searching for hidden meanings. Not even his loyal brother Don Carlos escaped scrutiny. Maria Cristina tried to protect their daughter, but even that made Ferdinand suspicious. He thought she was preparing Isabella to take over Spain under foreign influence. If she asked for alone time with her child, he wondered what dangerous ideas she might be planting in the little girl's mind. Even the natural act of a mother, bonding with her daughter, was twisted by his paranoia into a threat. The palace servants suffered too. They had to spy on the queen while still pretending to serve her loyally. Many developed anxiety, and staff turnover became constant. New servants, unfamiliar with the tense atmosphere, often made small mistakes Ferdinand took as evidence of betrayal. His obsession with finding Isabella's real father reached new lows. He had investigators look into every man Maria Cristina had ever known, checking medical records, family histories, and even letters from before Isabella was born. His bedroom turned into a museum of humiliation. Portraits of his dead wives, failed medical devices, and religious relics filled the room, a desperate collection of everything that hadn't worked. He held royal meetings there, surrounded by reminders of his own failure. Maria Christina's health began to collapse under the strain. She lost weight, her hair fell out, and she developed tremors she tried to hide. Her attendants said she was constantly on edge, always checking behind her or jumping at small sounds. In 1832, Ferdinand's paranoia peaked. He became convinced that Maria Christina was trying to poison him through touch. Before any physical contact, he forced her to undergo medical exams, while he watched to make sure her skin wasn't laced with toxins. These humiliating inspections marked the final collapse of their relationship. By this time, other countries were watching in horror. Some foreign powers even started supporting independence movements within Spain. They believed that splitting the country into parts might be safer than leaving it under a mad king's rule. In early 1833, Ferdinand's body began to break down. His speech became jumbled with accusations against invisible enemies. He talked of conspiracies that no one else could see. Slowly, he faded, his body finally giving out after years of stress, fear, and emotional torment. He died not with drama, but with exhaustion. The official cause was recorded as gout, but palace doctors privately admitted that it was everything: his body, mind, and spirit finally giving up. He had burned himself out from the inside. A secret autopsy revealed the truth behind his lifelong struggles. Ferdinand's anatomy had indeed been abnormal, just as rumors had claimed. His condition made normal sexual function nearly impossible. But the most haunting discovery was the evidence of self-inflicted damage. Starting in his youth, Ferdinand had tried to fix himself with crude self-surgeries. Instead of helping, they only made his condition worse and deepened the emotional scars. His preserved organ, along with drawings and notes, was locked away in the Vatican. It was considered too disturbing, too shameful, and too politically dangerous to ever be shown. Those who have seen it describe it as something both fascinating and tragic, a symbol of a man torn apart by the one thing he couldn't change. Ferdinand's death ended his rule, but the damage was far from over. His daughter, whether truly his or not, inherited a kingdom that was broken. Civil war, poverty, and disgrace followed. The once great Spanish Empire had crumbled, not from foreign invasion, but from the inside, destroyed by the personal struggles of one deeply troubled man. His story is a warning. It shows how power, when combined with personal pain and mental instability, can destroy not just one person, but an entire nation. His fears became Spain's downfall. His shame became its tragedy. In the end, Ferdinand left behind more than just a ruined country. He left a legacy of human suffering, a reminder of what happens when private torment becomes public disaster. His preserved organ, hidden deep in the Vatican, isn't just a medical curiosity, it's a symbol of wasted power, unhealed wounds, and a king who hurt everyone he touched. Ferdinand didn't go down in history as a great ruler. He became a cautionary tale, a king remembered not for his victories, but for how his personal demons consumed a kingdom that could never quite recover.